today in our scripture readings, as I said at the beginning of Mass, but I want to start. In the first reading from the book of Isaiah, we hear this reminder that we need to be people who live in our actions and in our words in a way that is Christian, in a way that is Catholic, and do so joyfully and with virtue. And then in that second reading, well, first of all, and that ties into our gospel, that very last phrase, that people may see the light of our works. So we can think about it and fall back upon the corporal and spiritual works of mercy, which we're called to do in our lives of faith. But I'm not going to focus on those this morning. That second reading we heard, St. Paul says to us in that letter that we are to be people who are rooted on the wisdom of God, not on the wisdom of the world. And the wisdom of God, the wisdom of Jesus for us today and our gospel is that we are to be salt of the earth and light to the world. Great. Now what does that mean? So we're going to take a little bit of a deep dive into salt and light this morning. I had some fun researching a lot of different types of salt this past week in order to get ready for this homily. So I found out that there is on average about 12 different types of salt out there. And you can picture going to the grocery store, whichever one locally you go to, and standing there in front of the shelf that is filled with all your different types of salt. Bottles small, boxes large, your table salt, your gray Celtic salt, your kosher salt, your pink Himalayan salt, your black Himalayan salt, your Hawaiian salt, your black Hawaiian salt, whatever it may be. And we really understand, okay, salt is a part of our life. We use it in many different ways. And yet there are some ways that we don't use it in the same way or have that same understanding as the people who Jesus was directly preaching these words to. So in that ancient world, and still today, but more so then, salt was used as a preservative. It was a precious mineral, precious thing that people sought after because it preserved their meat. It kept it from rotting. It kept it from going bad for a longer time. And so it was seen as precious. So salt preserves. Two, and because it preserves, it kills bacteria. They didn't have that understanding that we do today of bacteria, but it would kill it. So, hold off infection and wounds. So salt heals. And if you've ever gone swimming in the ocean when you have a wound or a cut or something somewhere on your body, it stings. It burns. Salt burns. Oh, and lastly, and Jesus brings this up in our gospel, salt has flavor. We use salt for that flavoring in many different dishes, whether it's on our French fries or if we're baking, we throw a little bit of salt in there. Baking soda is actually somehow connected to sodium carbohydrate, I think is what it's called, which is table salt. So in some way, when we bake, we're using more salt in that way. So salt adds flavor to our dishes. So if we take this then, so if we are to be salt of the earth, like salt to the world, then we, and our Christian faith and the way we live it out in the world, we're called to preserve goodness, truth, and faith in the world, in our communities. We're called to heal when the world turns away, seeks to live the culture of death rather than the culture of life that God gives to us. Sometimes it burns us and those we live with and encounter in the world when we do that, when we are salt to the world, upholding the truth and goodness that God calls us to live out. But in the end, we are called to bring good flavor to the world and to our communities. And that flavoring is a flavoring of joy and living out a life of faith and doing so in a joyful way because The Lord has given us such great hope. Be joy in the world. Okay, now on to light. So, light is an experience that we all have. We're experiencing it right now. And I'm not just saying because the lights are on here in the church and the sun's up outside. No, our experience of seeing anything is an experience of light. So if we think about that, it really is a blessing. If we were to take the church that we're sitting in right now and go up into the air a couple miles, kind of like that city on a hill that can't be hidden. But if we then were to have the sun set and to cut all the lights on the eastern seaboard, or at least here in the northeast, and then it's complete darkness. We're hanging in the air. And someone were to light a candle 30 miles away, we would be able to see the flickering light of that candle. So to give you an example, and it depends on how you measure it, if you include the curvature of the earth or not, 30 miles away to the east is almost to Batavia. To the north, it's the shores of Lake Ontario. To the south, it's further south in Hamburg, somewhere around Angola, Erie Beach area. And to the east, it's beyond Crystal Beach in Canada. Or to the west, it's beyond Crystal Beach in Canada. Our eyes can see and pick up on that light of a flickering candle in the darkness. That is the power of light that Jesus is speaking of. And our experience of light is very much different, I think, than it was in that time. All we have to do is flick on the light switch, and as long as the light bulb is working and nothing shorts out, the light goes on. And we live in a world that's very much overabsorbed by light. We see light. It's hard sometimes to even see the stars if we're in the greater Buffalo area. But if you go out to a place and you're far from a city and the sun goes down, you can't even see your hand in front of your face. A people in darkness have seen a great light. And that light is the light of Jesus Christ. And we are called to keep ourselves, those lamps, trimmed and burning with the light of Christ in us that we receive at our baptism. We're called to keep the light of Christ burning within us. And then, as Jesus uses that example, as lamps, we are called to shine that light out to the world. And remember that old song, "This little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine." The light of Christ in us, the light of Christ reflecting in us, shining out to the world. And as Jesus says in today's gospel, that light is not to be kept and put underneath a bushel basket. That light is to be put on that lampstand for everyone to see. We can't be the hidden Christian. We can't be the secret agent Catholic. We have to let our faith show in the way we live, in the way we go about living those corporal and spiritual works of mercy in the world.